Every great success begins with failure. Beyond success.
Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just dive right in because we have an absolutely incredible story today. I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine pouring literally everything you have, your life savings, your absolute blood, sweat, and tears, into building your ultimate dream. And then you have to stand there and watch it get completely destroyed. Not just once, but twice. Honestly, most people would have just accepted defeat right then and there, you know? They would have packed it up, cut their losses, and found a much safer path. But today, we're looking at a man who did the exact opposite. We're talking about a man who built a massive global empire, almost entirely on a foundation of devastating setbacks. We are talking about the legendary Soichiro Honda.
So really ask yourself, what would you do if your life's work was wiped out twice? Really think about the sheer weight of that for a second. Because this isn't some hypothetical business school scenario, this is literally what happened to Honda. And what's so fascinating about this entire story is the mindset it demands. I mean, most of us naturally view failure as a stop sign, right? It's a signal to turn back. But Soichiro Honda, he viewed every single devastating loss, every brutal rejection, and every literal pile of rubble as just a necessary lesson for progress. Success, in his eyes, was absolutely not built by avoiding failure. It was built by learning from it. To truly understand this relentless, almost obsessive drive, we've got to transport ourselves way back in time to rural Japan, right around 1906. Young Soichiro grew up in his father's bicycle repair shop, and he wasn't like other kids. He didn't care about regular toys at all. The kid loved tools. He loved the heavy smell of metal, the rhythmic sound of hammers striking steel. But the real turning point, the magical moment, happened when a motor car happened to drive through his village. Now, cars were incredibly rare in rural Japan back then. Young Soichiro literally chased after it, sprinting down the dirt road. And it wasn't to catch it. It was because he was just completely captivated by the heavy scent of engine oil and that intoxicating smell of gasoline. That single fleeting moment, it sparked a lifelong obsession with engines. He didn't just want to look at machines anymore. He wanted to build them.
But, as we all know, ambition requires action. So at just 15 years old, Honda made a massive, bold move. He packed up, left his quiet rural home, and headed straight for Tokyo to apprentice at an automobile repair shop called Art Shokai. Now, he didn't walk in and start building engines on day one. Far from it. He started at the absolute bottom. We're talking sweeping floors, cleaning, organizing tools, running errands all day. It was not glamorous. But here's the thing, he was watching everything. He proved his fundamental belief that absolutely no experience is wasted, as long as you pay attention and are willing to work your way up. And eventually, his patience paid off. He earned the right to actually repair engines, diagnosing complex problems and learning the absolute, uncompromising necessity of precision. Eventually, he took the leap and opened his own workshop. But just repairing other people's machines wasn't enough for him anymore. He wanted to invent. So he poured his time, his energy, and all his meager savings into designing a small but totally essential component, the piston ring. His grand, ambitious dream was to become a major supplier for Toyota. But when he finally presented his carefully crafted parts, Toyota flat out rejected them. They told him they just didn't meet their strict quality standards. It was a crushing blow. So the crucial takeaway here is how he reacted to this. For a lot of entrepreneurs, a rejection from a giant like Toyota would be the end of the road. But Honda didn't sit around asking, oh, why did they reject me? Instead, he asked himself, okay, what do I need to learn? He went right back to the books, studying engineering and metallurgy. Failure became his absolute greatest teacher.
And you know what? It worked. After years of painstakingly refining his piston rings, Toyota finally accepted them. It was a huge victory. He founded a company called Tokai Seiki in 1937 and built his factory. He had essentially won. But then, 1944 happened. A massive, catastrophic earthquake struck and severely damaged his factory. It was devastating, but he painstakingly rebuilt it. Then, just a year later in 1945, during the relentless bombings of World War II, his factory was destroyed all over again, almost completely wiped off the map. Twice. 2 separate times, everything he had sacrificed his entire life for was reduced to ashes by forces entirely out of his control.
Just take a second to really let that sink in. The physical factory was gone. The walls, the machines, ruined. But his knowledge? That wasn't gone. His hard-earned experience wasn't gone, and his determination was completely untouched. So he made the incredibly difficult choice to sell the ruined remains of his company to Toyota. Now, he easily could have taken that money and just retired comfortably. Honestly, almost anyone else would have. But Honda just couldn't stop. He was an inventor at his core.
Yes, his factory was a pile of rubble, but a brilliant new idea was already forming in his mind right there amidst the devastation of post-war Japan.
The situation in Japan at that time was dire. The transportation system was totally broken. People desperately needed to get around, but cars were way too expensive and fuel was incredibly scarce. Bicycles, however, were absolutely everywhere. So in 1946, Honda opened a tiny new workshop, the Honda Technical Research Institute, and he did something brilliant. He took heavy, discarded military engines, literal relics of a devastating war, and he attached them directly to everyday bicycles. I mean, it sounds so incredibly simple to us now, but back then it was completely revolutionary. He created an affordable, motorized bicycle for the masses, literally built out of scrap. For the very first time, he wasn't just manufacturing components, he was creating massive, life-changing solutions for millions of everyday people.
But as his ambitions grew from these simple motorized bicycles to actual full-scale motorcycles, he realized something vital. Building a global empire requires a lot more than just brilliant engineering. It requires a perfect partnership. Enter Takeo Fujisawa. See, while Honda was completely obsessed purely with the technology, the machines, and chasing engineering perfection, Fujisawa took the reins on everything else. Strategy, sales, explosive growth. That was his domain. It was exactly this duality, one genius creating the machines and another genius building the business, that allowed Honda to confidently step out onto the global battlefield.
And when it came to Honda's side of that battlefield, it was all about two things: speed and quality. Honda lived by a very simple but intense philosophy. He said, "The racing track is the greatest laboratory for technology." He didn't race for the fame or the trophies. He raced because the brutal, unforgiving conditions of the track exposed every single weakness, every tiny vibration, and every point of failure in a machine. He used that extreme environment to ruthlessly perfect his designs, which led directly to engineering breakthroughs like the legendary 1949 Dream Type D. He was literally building his dream, one grueling, high-speed race at a time.
But Honda also knew that if you truly want to change the world, you have to make machines for everyone, not just for professional racers. So in 1958, he introduced the Honda Super Cub. And the design parameters behind this thing were just brilliant. It had to be reliable, it had to be cheap to maintain, it had to be super easy to operate, and it had to be available to everyone. It wasn't meant to be flashy or complicated. It used a simple step-through design that solved real, everyday problems. The Super Cub basically brought the freedom of motorcycles to everyday people who had never, ever considered riding one before. It was an absolute masterpiece of accessible, functional engineering.
So, having completely conquered Japan, Honda set his sights on the ultimate challenge in 1959, the American market. Now, at the time, let me tell you, this was considered a wildly daring, almost reckless move. The U.S. market was totally dominated by massive, heavy, loud motorcycles. American riders strongly associated bikes with raw power and rebellion. And then here comes American Honda Motor Company, this tiny operation trying to sell small, quiet, friendly Japanese motorcycles. The skepticism was just immense. All the industry experts said he was going to fail miserably.
So, how on earth did they win? Well, they won by executing a marketing masterstroke that completely shifted American culture. And it was all driven by one legendary slogan: "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." Instead of trying to outmuscle the big, scary rebel bikes, Honda specifically targeted everyday Americans, students, office workers, families. They showed motorcycles not as dangerous, noisy machines, but as fun, welcoming, and highly practical daily transportation. It was a total paradigm shift. It worked beautifully, and their sales absolutely skyrocketed.
Now, a normal, reasonable person would probably stop right there, right? You've conquered motorcycles globally. Take a bow. But Soichiro Honda was already dreaming even bigger. He wanted to enter the automobile industry. And once again, everybody told him it was literally impossible. The global car market was controlled by massive, deeply entrenched giants. Even the Japanese government openly doubted that a motorcycle company should try to build cars. But, as we've seen throughout this whole story, Honda never built his life around what other people thought was possible. He aggressively pushed into the automobile industry, fought off the critics, and, true to form, he won.
By the 1970s, Honda was an undisputed global powerhouse in both motorcycles and cars. And that brings us to 1973, and perhaps his most surprising move of all. At the exact height of his immense success, Soichiro Honda made the shocking decision to just retire. Why? Because he understood a really profound truth. A truly lasting company cannot depend solely on its founder. He stepped away willingly because he firmly believed that for Honda to survive for generations, it needed a culture built on teamwork, youth, and continuous innovation. It couldn't just run on the passion of one single man forever. But even in his retirement, he never lost that fiery curiosity. And he left behind a defining philosophy that I just love. It all comes down to one number, 99%. Honda famously said that success represents only 1% of your work. The remaining 99%, that is called failure. Let that sink in for a minute. The destroyed factories, the rejected piston rings, the countless design flaws over the years, all of that wasn't the opposite of success. To him, it was the absolute, essential 99% required to finally reach that glorious 1%.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. Are you treating failure as a wall or a staircase? Soichiro Honda had absolutely no guarantee of success. He had zero protection from total disaster. But he had the immense, unwavering courage to try again after a crushing rejection and again after total physical destruction. He proved that the greatest engines in the world aren't built from metal alone. They are built from sheer persistence. So the next time you face a devastating setback, ask yourself what Honda would ask. What can I learn from this, and how do I take the next step up? Thanks for joining me today, and I really hope this story fuels your own journey forward.